Okay. Again, I'm Chad Moore. I'm the lead narrative designer on WildStar. My esteemed colleague here is Michael Geldard, who is our global brand manager and also demo driver extraordinaire. So what we're going to do today, we're going to show you a bunch of the new stuff that we've been working on in the game. We're going to start by showing you our housing reveal video that came out a few weeks ago. We're going to talk about that for a few minutes, and then we'll jump into some in-game stuff.
I'm Phineas T. Rotostar, and today I'd like to talk to you about home. Home. A place to put your feet up. A place to hang your hat. A place that, thanks to years of research by Protostar Corporation, has a statistically insignificant chance of killing you. We here at Protostar would like to interest you in a new home, on a new world. The planet Nexus. Yes, Nexus. Planet of mystery, world of excitement. Where'd it come from? No idea. But thanks to Protostar, bam, you can put a house on it. Feel the adventure of clearing your land. The pride of building your home. The freedom to make it your own. But that's not all. Plant a garden. Build a windmill. Erect a large, defensive cannon. You can do anything with your land, and thanks to Protostar, the possibilities are endless. Not feeling neighborly? No problem. Space is not an issue. Thanks to a miracle of science, Protostar can rip your land right out of the ground and hurl it into the sky, letting us build even more houses. That's right, houses in the sky, because when you think about it, every customer is an island, so why not live on one? In the sky. Protostar, making dreams come true. For money. Protostar Corporation is not responsible for making actual dreams come true.
So, obviously, housing is going to be one of the pillars of our design. We've gotten really great feedback about the video itself and the fact that we're going to have housing from the community at large. Something to take away from that video as well is that we think it's very important that WildStar has its own unique personality. For those of you guys that saw the trailer last year, it also had some aspects of that. You know, our characters are kind of funny and they're memorable and accessible. Our art style has a lot of personality just on its own. And so that's a really, really important aspect of how we design our game and make our assets. So just a quick recap. The game WildStar takes place on the planet Nexus, which is the most legendary planet in the whole galaxy. It was once the homeworld of an advanced race known as the Elden. And so about 1,000 years ago, the Elden disappeared, and along with it the location of planet Nexus. It's just recently been discovered again, and now all of the races across the galaxy are racing here to Nexus in order to stake their claim. You know, they want to find out what the Elden were doing here, what kind of ancient technologies were here, arcane magic. That whole idea is what drives the conflict between our two factions. Who gets to control this place, and the powers that will come with it. So that's sort of the setup for the game's story. Now we're going to talk a little bit about combat. So since our announcement last year at Gamescom, we've been doing a lot of work on our combat system. One of the most exciting things that has come out recently is something that we call free-form targeting. So, you know, we still have regular targeting, so you can click or tab and you can target a creature, but we also now have what's known as free-form targeting. So Mike will activate a spell. He'll get an indicator on the ground telling you where that spell is going to fire. If there happens to be a creature in the line of sight, it kills that creature. If there happens to be multiple creatures that are in line of sight, then it takes all of them out as well. So what's obvious, right, I think from just this small example here is that things like movement and location become very important now in our encounters. And we think it adds a level, sort of a dynamic level to our combat that makes it unique. We're going to spawn a creature here. This is Stalagmite, who is sort of one of our level 6 to 7 bosses. He's an experiment of the Eldens. And what you'll notice as Mike engages Stalagmite is it has a number of unique attacks. These attacks are shown through what we call our telegraph system. So the telegraph system, there's an indicator on the ground that tells you, hey, something bad is about to happen in that area on the ground, and you need to move out of it before that bad thing happens to you. So, and what you'll notice here for some creatures like Stalagmite, who's a boss, he has a number of these different attacks that take place as you're fighting in this encounter. And you'll notice that as Mike's fighting him and he's using a broad range of his attacks, he also has to move. It's a very dynamic and challenging way of combat. It's not just your old 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Every encounter is unique, and we think a lot of fun. So we'll see if, yeah, Mike took care of business this time. Well done. Real quick, let's fire up the other video, Mike, the telegraph video. So, again, the idea of telegraphs and that system is the core of our combat in WildStar. So what we did is we have made this sort of in-house video that sort of gives a broad range of the system. So when you start early, you'll get simple telegraphs, with longer durations that do less damage. But as the game progresses, as you get higher levels, they begin to change in difficulty. They begin to change in shape. The sorts of attacks that happen and the amount of damage done begins to increase as you get higher levels in the game. There's unique attacks like this. This is a creature that you fight. You'll see multiple indicators on the ground for some of these encounters, like this guy who hurls grenades. You'll see really large indicators, which means you have to move very fast or be hit by the attack. There's randomly placed indicators for creatures like this, and it really makes you have to pay attention. Here's a creature that burrows, so that indicator follows you around until the creature decides where it's going to attack. Here's a progressive series of indicators. Here's one where it's randomly placed and there's a time aspect associated with it. And this creature also has a burrow attack because it's a boss-like creature. Here's Stalagmite that we were just talking about. Obviously a boss, so he has a number of different attacks. This is a very cool attack. This creature is called a buzzbing, and so when it's fighting you, it spews out this honey. And if you're running through that honey at any point, it slows you down, right? So if you happen to be in any one of these spots and you can't get out in time because you've hit the honey, then you get damaged. It just adds another layer so that you sort of have to learn how these creatures attack and how you're going to get through each encounter. This next creature that we'll show here uses these giant tornadoes, right? So in the middle of combat, he'll summon a tornado, which interrupts any attacks that you happen to be doing. Here's an environmental puzzle that you can use to your advantage. It's a poison mushroom, so if you've brought creatures in there, you can use it to attack them. Here's sort of an orbital strike, so you can call this orbital strike down. As long as you get out of the way, it will kill the creature that's in the way there. This is something that we've been focusing on a lot lately, which is sort of having multiple layers of these indicators. So we have a standard red indicator that tells you this is a bad place to be, but you'll have this blue indicator which may tell you that's beneficial. So you can actually start to pick different combinations of location in order to get through these encounters. Here's sort of just an example of a standard encounter with multiple mobs. You do that quite a bit in WildStar. There's a lot of movement associated with that. But the thing to take away from this, the thing that we've really been focusing on a lot as we've been developing our combat system is we want it to be unique. And we want it to be different than your standard 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 combat. We want it to be challenging for the player and something that's always fun and always different. I don't know if you guys have been following us, but this is a creature called Metal Maw that we developed last year at Gamescom. So the community, we had an event where the community basically told us what they wanted to see in a boss, and we had an artist in the back who was drawing it in real time. And so we got to the end and there was sort of a picture, and then we basically spent the last year actually creating that creature and sending weekly updates about the progress. And so you'll see, we showed finished concept and finished model and finished animations, and now it's actually a boss that you fight, and it has an impressive array of attacks that make it probably one of the most challenging creatures we have in the game right now. That's really the basics, right? That's the foundation. And again, we'll say it a lot during this demo, but you know, our hope with all of these additions to our combat system is that it's something that's different than what that players have seen up to this point in MMOs. So we will move back here to Olgarok. We talked a little bit before about Loftite, right? So here's an example. When you get to this space, there's this blue crystal called Loftite that makes you lighter than air as you get close to it. So there's this blue aura that's around Mike. It allows him to jump 6 or 7 times higher than he could normally do that. Not only is it very fun to do this, but it also allows Mike to get places that he couldn't normally get to. So, you know, we'll actually show you this a little bit later, but there's like a whole new adventure area that's at the top of these cliffs if you decide to go up there. But this is an example of what we call a dynamic play space. So, you know, there's regular play spaces that just have hostile mobs, and every once in a while I'll do a dynamic play space that changes up the gameplay and allows players to be a little more creative. Here is another example of one of these play spaces. This is a minefield. So Mike will go here and he'll scare a couple of sheep, and he can use it to blow the sheep up. But he can also use that to his advantage against more powerful enemies. So over here, there's a group of space pirates. They're actually the guys that set this minefield up in the first place. So he'll engage these guys, and then he can draw them out into the minefield, and as long as he doesn't get blown up himself, he can use it as a benefit in combat. Do you guys know about our path system? Have you followed that at all? Okay, so along with your race class choice that you normally have in MMOs, we have given you the choice of what's known as a path. And there are 4 paths in our game. There's an explorer, a scientist, a soldier, and a settler. And each one of those paths sort of represents a different play style. So in the case of an explorer, we're going to send you to sort of challenging places, right? In this particular case, we're sending you up to this top of this little mountain, and you're going to set out what's known as a vista beacon. So you'll see down here, Mike is getting a signal. When he gets to strong a signal, he'll spawn this vista beacon. And then he gets rewarded with a cinematic where he sort of gets the lay of the land. Now that he's gotten up to this point, we're going to show you, some of the things that may be coming up. At the end of this cinematic, we point you to another place that might be cool to explore. So there's this cave. The cave might have some ancient elven technology or a powerful creature. But, the takeaway here is that when you've chosen your path, we're going to direct you to content that is customly designed for that particular play style. So if you're a soldier, you're going to be doing a lot more fighting. You'll get a lot more soldier missions. We haven't talked a lot about the scientist and the settler yet, but there'll be more information about that coming up soon. Okay, so we're going to just show you a quick example of a standard encounter in WildStar. Mike's going to engage these guys. These guys are known as the Darkspur Cartel, and they're sort of the organized crime syndicate of our game. So he'll start out with an opening attack, and then what you'll notice, right, as Mike gets through this encounter is, these guys have a number of different attacks, right, and a number of different telegraphs that they're laying down through that. What that means is Mike is moving around a lot. He's picking his locations based on where those guys are located and based on places, where the threat indicators are telling him not to be. Like I said before, this is going to be a standard encounter type where you're engaging multiple mobs and you're using these new and creative ways to get past them. Another way that he could have gotten past this if he wanted to, if he was a stealth class, let's say, he could sneak in here and activate this crate of rockets. And so if there were hostile mobs here in this camp, they would get blown up by those rockets, and it's just another way for him to get past that particular encounter. Okay, a real quick note about how we design our levels. So, because this is going to be a new place for players, we don't want them to come to these zones and get lost, right? So one of the philosophies that we adhere to in our level design is we like to give people unique subzones and really large and visible POIs and landmarks so that they can triangulate and get around our zones, right? So just in the example of Algarok, which is the zone we're in now, you've got this sort of wooded valley here. It's one of the only places in Algarok where there's this many trees. Over to the right, we've got the loft-type pillars that we saw before. You've got the loft-type cliffs, which are unique looking in themselves. There's this sort of snowy valley up here where we've got some bootleggers you'll have to deal with at some point. And then right in the middle of the valley is the town of Gallo, which is sort of central, sort of the central place for you to do your buying and selling and things like trade skills. Trade skills are something that we've also been working on a lot since last year. For example, we have mining in the game. So when you're a miner, you'll run around the world. There'll be mining nodes. You'll attack those nodes. Ore will pop out, and you can collect it up. But every once in a while, when you go to collect those, when you go to attack that node, a creature will spawn. And that creature won't be too happy about the fact that you've been trying to steal the ore off its back. And every once in a while, you'll run across what's known as an ore worm. And that is this massive creature here who is not going to be happy at all that you're trying to take the ore off its back. And so the ore worm has a whole series of different attacks, unique attacks, things that you probably haven't seen up to that point. It can spawn these little ore mites that will also come and attack you, so you'll have to deal with those as you're attacking the ore worm itself. The thing here is we would consider this sort of epic trade skill content, right? So, but you're never going to be sure when it's going to happen, and so even something like trade skills, we want that experience to be memorable and something a little bit different than players have seen in other MMOs. All right. So just behind the town of Gallo is what I would consider probably the most unique of all the subzones in Algarok, which is this archaeological dig, where they have uncovered this ancient Elden facility and awakened this massive robot that we call an Annihilator. The Annihilator obviously is not very happy about the fact that he's been woken up after 1,000 years, and so your adventure here is going to be about figuring out a way to deactivate this and save the archaeologists that are currently under attack. The reason why we think it's important to show things like this at early levels is we want to give you a preview of the kinds of things that you're going to be having to deal with at level cap, right? So here you don't directly engage the Annihilator, but when you get to level cap and our world story later on, these are the kinds of creatures that you're going to have to be fighting. We really like to reward the player with these sort of epic moments, even early on, to sort of remind them, hey, you've come to one of the coolest planets in the whole galaxy. And again, giving them a preview of some of the things that they'll be dealing with once they get to the end of the game. All right, so that's Algarok. There's lots of other content there, but we don't have a ton of time to see it, but all of it's very cool. This is Gallerus, which is a 14 to 20 zone. It's basically part of the persistent world, the same persistent world that Algarok is in, so there's not a load when you come to different zones. It's all a persistent world. Gallerus is the location of a massive Elden device known as the Focus of Air. And so because of that device, this place is racked with storms and wind and stormy weather. You'll notice that these trees are being affected by that wind. The grass on the ground is being affected by that wind. These windmills obviously are being used to generate power. But that sort of sense of environmental immersion is something that's really important to us. The environment tells the story, and we've got a really talented art team, and they do a good job of doing that, I think. Because the Focus of Air is in Gallerus, there's a big war going on between the Exiles, which is the faction that we're playing right now, and the other faction, which is known as the Dominion. And so here we have another dynamic play space. This is sort of a battle that's currently happening. And so as you adventure through this particular subzone, you'll have to deal with, making sure you don't get blown up by incoming projectiles. There's these ships here that will fire at you from above. You can use some of those things to your advantage if you're a player who understands how to do that. But again, we keep harping on it a lot. These are really, really unique subzones. Each one is a little bit different. We don't want players to ever get bored or feel that they're sort of in the grind anytime that they're playing through the game. This is Tempest Refuge, which is the major hub here in Gallerus. Obviously, again, very unique looking place. This massive rock is visible from almost anywhere in the zone. This town is also under siege, and so back here in this space, there'll be dynamic events and public events against the other faction that players can engage in if they want to. Down here beneath Tempest Refuge is another completely unique subzone. This is known as Gallerus. And so the Focus of Air is located at the very end of this. And because of that, the winds that go through here are very powerful. And so you have these tornadoes that are just spawning randomly. And if you're the kind of player who likes to do this kind of thing, you can use those tornadoes to get on top of things like these rocks. If you get up there every once in a while, if you've figured out how to do that, there may be a reward up there for people that figure that kind of thing out. So again, at the end of this valley, we have this ancient Elden facility. There's a whole story that takes place down here, but probably one of the coolest things in all of Gallerus is this device. This is the Focus of Air itself. When you get here and you're adventuring through Gallerus at the beginning of the game, you won't know what purpose this device serves. You'll start to get hints throughout the game of the bigger story and what the Elden were doing here and what they actually use this device for. And then later, once you've gotten to Cap, you'll come back here. That will spawn a dungeon. That'll be part of our bigger world story. And you'll start to get the true story of what happened to the Elden and the dangers that they left behind. This is a race that lives here on Nexus. These are the Falkren. They were a creation of the Elden who have developed this sort of barbaric civilization over the last 1,000 years. They're not happy about the invaders that have come to Nexus, and so they've declared war on everybody, and you're going to have to come here and deal with them. Again, because we're so close to the Focus of Air, and the Falkren are also masters of elemental magic, this place is racked with storms. There are storm clouds, there's lightning. The atmosphere here is very dark and foreboding. It's actually telling the story of what the Falkren are all about just through the visuals. And at the very top of the hill here, we have this encounter space where you will face off against the Falkren's champion, this creature known as Briog the Bonebreaker. So Mike will spawn Briog. And, obviously, very cool looking, very dangerous looking. He's a very challenging fight. This is probably about level 20. And so the power of his attacks is much higher than creatures that you've come to encounter before this. He will have a different series of attacks. Obviously, we haven't seen these types of attacks before, so Mike is using a bunch of different abilities that he hasn't used up to this point. We'll see if he can actually get through this without getting killed. Oh, wait, did you cheat? Yeah, you did. Anyway, but the takeaway there, right, is like if we've done our jobs as designers, when you reach this creature who's one of the tougher creatures in the content that you've seen up to this point, you will have learned everything you need to know through the encounters that we've presented to you to be successful and defeat him. So that's the end of the demo. If you guys have any questions, I can answer them for you now. Mike will fly around a little bit and show you guys some new stuff as I'm answering those. So feel free.